playful at least. 2020 Nissan 370Z Nismo. We've already reviewed one example earlier on the channel, compared against a GR86, but that was an automatic, and here the owner has chose right by going with the traditional 6-speed manual. We're powered by a 3.7 liter naturally aspirated V6. That's the VQ engine, making 350 horsepower at 7,400 RPM and 276 pound-feet of torque at 5,200 RPM. That's an extra 18 horsepower over the regular 370Z. But the car also weighs more than a regular 370Z by about 125-ish pounds. This car weighs in at 3,450 pounds. We have double wishbone front suspension, multi-link in the rear, and a wheelbase of 100 inches. For comparison, the GR Supra is 97 inches and the GR86 is 101 inches. As far as the Nismo treatment goes, gives us increased spring rates, upgraded dampers, upgraded brakes from 12.6 inch in the front and 12.1 inch in the rear to 14 inches in the front and 13.8 inches in the rear. These 19-inch raised forged wheels versus the regular 18-inch alloys in the normal 370Z. And we've got these Bridgestone Potenza Sport Rubber 245 section width in the front, 285 section width in the rear. We also have Nismo specific front and rear fascias, rear spoiler and diffuser, and this is actually functional aero. It does increase downforce. And I also love the little red accents that you see on the front and even on the side views here, and there's going to be more on the interior. Speaking of interior, we get Recaros with the Nismo treatment as well that have these red suede inserts and an Alcantara wrapped steering wheel. MSRP on these was right around $46,000 when new. Market value today can be anywhere from 20K to 40K. And in terms of mods, we have an oil cooler and EBC blue brake pads. The owner did start tracking this car very recently, and he was running really concerning oil temps after just 1 or 2 hot laps. We're talking like 280 plus. And he says the oil cooler made a huge difference. Again, red. Love these little accents. Red nude marker. And the steering wheel only tilts, no telescoping, but the actual gauge cluster moves along with you, just like in a McLaren. By default, the car has rev match enabled, and it's actually a pretty good rev match. So I'm in 4th, clutch into 3rd, really nice and smooth. To turn it off, we're gonna hold this S mode button right there. The S disappears, and now we manually rev match. I'm already grateful that we have a manual transmission, because the automatic, the slush box, and the 370Z Nismo, I feel holds it back. Here, I'm not going to say that it's a magnificent manual transmission. You still have that slight truck-like agricultural character that a lot of the 350, 370, and even the new Z have. But it's relatively mechanical. I would still take this over the auto any day. Not the greatest clutch feel, but the pedals overall are feeling pretty congruent. Linear throttle response, high amount of travel. Same thing with the brakes, not very grabby. I would say not as sporty actually as I was expecting, requiring a good amount of travel as well. Was it giving the beans? That extra added weight means the extra horsepower is necessary. She's playful at least. But you feel that heft through the corners, absolutely. Throttle for a naturally aspirated engine does require a bit heavier of a jab than you might otherwise expect. Hydraulic steering giving a decent amount of feel. You know, tire choice is also part of the equation here. I feel like the other 370Z I drove had a more talkative front end. Moderate sharpness here, not the tightest front end. I think a lot of that is going to be the weight and the way that the car is set up suspension-wise. Just take a moment to set before it bites. I like the Alcantara wrapped wheel. It feels nice in my hands. Ergonomically though, I just feel really far away from everything. Wish there was some telescoping to the wheel. A lot of Japanese cars, of course, are more optimized for shorter drivers. So if you are a taller driver, ergonomically, you are going to feel a bit compromised. Yeah, as we're going over some bumps and pushing in the corners a bit, you can really feel that steering feedback. The feedback is pretty good. Even the steering ratio is very 1-to-1. And the sharpness is just a little bit lacking. Suspension being on the softer side makes this car not punishing at all to drive on these streets, even though the road surface here leaves something to be desired. But the downside there is that you do get a bit more body motion than you would otherwise want in your sports car. There we go. Now we're nailing those heel tails. Just have to be mindful to flip the throttle a little bit harder. I do like that these gauges up here, this pod is further away from you as the driver, and a lot of people don't appreciate the distance of things from your eyes. And the reason why it's so important is that the way your eyes work, you have a ciliary muscle that changes the shape of your lens, that allows you to accommodate for things closer to you versus being more relaxed when you're looking further away. And when something is really close to you, like an infotainment screen, and then you have to look far away, there's a lot of accommodation that has to happen with your ciliary muscle. Now that's not a big deal when you're younger. As you get older, your lens stiffens and accommodation becomes a little bit harder, and those small, tiny little increases in fatigue there are just not optimal and not necessary. And having the gauges further back is this very small design element that I appreciate. And for those who don't know, I am an MD. I was doing plastic surgery, so I do care a little bit more about these little human-centric design elements, even ergonomics, right? In surgery, we care so much about ergonomics because it reduces errors, reduces injury risk, improves economy of motion. And those things apply to driving too. Like, you want economy of movement while you're driving. You want to be efficient and take the minimal amount of movement necessary. So this, spacing of the gear shift from the steering wheel a little bit further than I would like. My positioning, my seating compared to the steering wheel and the pedals also not optimal. Not the biggest deal on a short drive, but especially over time, you're hot lapping, you're putting more hours, more miles in the driver's seat. It does add up, and these little increases in cognitive or physical fatigue do make a difference. I do appreciate the level of communication I'm getting here. It's more so than a standard 370Z, and largely that's going to be suspension changes and such, lighter wheels, less unsprung mass. And really the steering is probably the most communicative part of the driving experience. But even as you toss the car around and play with the weight transfer, you can feel it. It is a little bit in slow-mo and not quite as precise and sharp as I would want from a dedicated sports car, simply because, as you push a car harder, you want that razor edge response, especially on track. The added weight here is definitely noticeable. I would love to compare this against a regular 370Z back to back. So for any owners out in the Las Vegas region, if you're interested, visit us on jabalandcars.com, fill out that form on the homepage, and I'll be in touch. But that added power over the standard Z gets you excited, right? And then you realize the added weight largely negates it. The engine does have a very linear, natural response to it though. I mean, as you'd expect from a naturally aspirated engine. Oh yeah, a little trail brake, you can feel that tail come out. A lot of the motion to the car is almost in slow-mo. It actually is a more approachable car to push for that reason. Slightly longer wheelbase than the Supra, plus the way that it's set up makes it far more approachable and forgiving than the Supra, which can be a bit snappy at times. Has that very well-known VQ engine note, which is more polarizing than you might expect. I think it sounds decent. I think it sounds actually fine, but not everyone shares that opinion. Now, overall, for $20,000 to $40,000 on the used market, there are certain things here that you just can't get from the new Z, right? The hydraulic steering is definitely far more communicative. The interior quality is not nearly as modern and high quality feeling as the new Z, but things like styling are going to be highly subjective. I personally love the new Z styling, but I think even this looks pretty sharp, especially with the added aggression with the Nismo. But the biggest thing holding this thing back is simply the weight. When you're weighing almost 3,500 pounds, even with good fundamentals, the double wishbone front, multi-link rear, you got the front engine rear wheel drive, manual transmission, hydraulic steering, like a lot of the fundamentals are there. It does get a little bit watered down just from the weight. Nice little double clutch there in a second. Very natural throttle response once you get used to it. And having a naturally aspirated engine is also something you don't get in the new Z. So, pros and cons here. I think it is more unique than something like the GR86. It's not quite as playful, but it is similar to the GR86, relatively approachable as you start pushing it. And part of that is going to be just the way the car is set up. And the other part of that is the level of communication that the car gives you. Things like that hydraulic steering. Look, even the red accent around the start-stop button. Gotta love it. And I should also mention that the seats are actually pretty comfortable, at least for myself, 6'1", 175 pounds, and supportive enough for a car that you want to use primarily on the street. So that's also a nice touch over the regular. But my friends, let me know what you think of the 2020 370Z Nismo with the 6-speed manual. Big shout out to Michael, the owner, for letting me review his car. If you want your car reviewed, visit us on jabalandcars.com. Much love, my friends, and I'll see you all in that next one.